I want you to consider this impertinent question. When was the last time you asked God for something and God let you down? When was the last time that God did not respond in the way that you wanted, and when you wanted, and with what you wanted? When was the last time you asked God for help and didn't get it? Now, was it for relief from anxiety or illness for yourself or someone you love? Was it for something as lofty as peace in the Middle East, or something as basic as the bookie's prayer, Mama needs a new pair of shoes, right? And maybe as you prayed, you promised God something, if God would only do as you ask. So I ask you this morning, what was it like when, having made these promises, having put yourself on the line, having put your money on the table or in the offering plate, and nothing happened? Now I want to be clear, I don't doubt the people who testify about God's timely and successful interventions in their lives, whose faith is verified and ratified on a daily basis. I do not doubt such people, and I do not doubt such testimonials. I just don't believe many are here in church. Because I think church is that place where most disappointed Christians gather. That's where they end up, wondering about the ways and the whereabouts of the Almighty. Wondering, just like the Hebrews in the wilderness at Meribah and Massah, is God among us or not? But today's sermon is not about the absence of God. Today's sermon is about our expectations, what we want God to do for us. The sermon is about how we create God in our own image. The sermon is about how we want God to conform to the necessities and needs in ways that make sense to us, and always on our timetable. So a question for you this morning is this: where in the world did we get the idea that it was God's job to answer our spiritual and moral shopping list? Who taught you that? How deadly? How dangerous? Is God out there somewhere beyond the Amazon rainbow? So somewhere in cyberspace, ready to give Alexa a run for her money? One of you sent me a newspaper article about 3 months ago, and the title of the article was Religion on the Fields of Football. And you asked me to respond to the thesis of the article, that professional athletes tend to say that their athletic prowess is due to their prayers on the football field. So they invite God into the locker room and onto the football field, and God increasingly is invoked as a motivational factor in professional sports. But I was thinking this week, behind the signs of the cross, after touchdowns, is this basic implication. Professional athletes, by their example, praying on the field, they are making prayer more credible and respectable to millions of fans. And won't God just be grateful for such an endorsement? Believing that God cares a whit about football is dangerous to all involved. Even the winners. They don't know it, but even the winners, and especially the losers. See, what happens when you fumble? Well, what happens when the other team's prayers seem more effective and efficacious than yours? What happens then? And what happens when godless Mary Smith gets the scholarship, or the promotion, or even tenure, and you don't? Is God among us or not? You need to realize God doesn't like to be tested. Let me say that up front. And God speaks to the psalmist these words: "Do not harden your hearts as those at Meribah, or on the day at Massah in the wilderness, when your mothers and fathers tested me, even though they had seen my work." What kind of people manipulate and test God? The people who err in their hearts, God says. Those who do not regard my ways. The Hebrews felt like they were shortchanged, okay? You need to know such people annoy God. God says, I've sworn my anger. They will never enter my rest. That's how God answers the question, is God among us or not? And I was thinking this week, I think I would have been more tactful than God. I think I might have said something like this. Your understanding of God needs work. See, God is not your personal Pez dispenser. You see, if God has disappointed you, there's probably something wrong with you. That's how I would have said it, a little softer. But God gets straight to the point. Our sufferings and our trials, our personal distresses, great or small, they are not designed as some little laboratory, moral laboratory, in which we test the existence of God. When we tempt God, which we do every day, we are trying to make sure that God fits into the dimensions of our private dilemmas when we want to bring God down to size. Here's my problem, God. Solve it for me. We don't care what God has done in the past. The issue is this. Here's my problem, God, and if you are all you say you are, then solve it. What's my little problem to the one who made the heavens? Come on, God. Make me and mine safe. Tempting God like this is not an act of faith. It is a concession to doubt and fear. Because we aren't certain, we want to bear the implication of a true, unvarnished answer to the question, is God among us or not? You see, from the 21st century, when we look back through history, we can see how God was among the Hebrews, how God had carried them through both the Red Sea and the wilderness. And from where we stand in the 21st century, it seems a little silly that the Hebrews doubted the providence of God. They had evidence in front of them. They had the evidence, but they wanted something more. They wanted satisfaction. These silly, ungrateful Hebrews. And from our perspective, they are so wrong, right? Why would you tempt God like that? And yet we do it every day. Paul tells us in Romans 5 that God neither leaves us in our problems nor solves our problems for us. Rather, God joins with us in our problems, and through them we become more than either our problems or their solutions. And then in the same chapter, Paul makes this outlandish statement. We, as people of faith, are to rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope, and hope will never disappoint. Paul is not saying, wish sufferings upon ourselves. That's not what he's saying, but he is saying this. When suffering comes, and it will come, you need to ask yourself, what is the tensile strength of your faith? Who still believes that suffering produces endurance? Who still believes that endurance produces character? Who still believes that character produces hope that will never disappoint? Who still believes that there is strength in adversity? Do any of you believe that still? I do. I know. This is exactly the way faith is expressed in my life over and over again. I am a terrible faith person when I'm on the mountaintop. But in the suffering, that's where I find God. See, God is not saying, Keith, you need to be a masochist and take these sufferings in your life. God is saying to me, as a person of faith, this is my way of showing you that faith is often expressed and found in suffering. This church is filled with empirical types. Lots of science. I love it. Rational, thoughtful people you are. So here's a case study for you. Okay? Are you ready? Where in the world is the Christian faith at its liveliest? Where in the world are you more likely to find people who affirm the presence of God even in their sufferings and their trials? Anybody want to take a guess? Well, note how the vitality of faith is expressed in these strange places. Africa, Latin America, the Middle East, the Far East. Studies have shown religion doesn't flourish in the settled places of our world. It's on the wane in Western Europe, Great Britain, Scandinavia, Australia, New Zealand, and also in those enlightened parts of the United States. And what I'm about to say may sound simplistic, but where people suffer, they don't see God as in opposition to their problems. They don't see God as a mere solution to be invoked. They view God as present in and with them in their sufferings. They see suffering, real suffering, not just suburban angst. They see suffering as an occasion to experience God in a different way. And they get Paul. Because they struggle daily. Their suffering is numbing. They believe, like Paul, they're going to find God in the middle of their sufferings. Because that's the promise. And that's why they can affirm that suffering produces endurance. And endurance produces character. And character produces hope. And hope never disappoints. Folks, I know this faith thing that we share is hard. And I know that suffering is a problem for so many people. It keeps so many people from considering God. But there are also other ways that we keep God at arm's length. There are so many ideas that we possess, wrong ideas, because of our misinterpretation of Scripture or our poor theology. What is that one thing in your life that you're clinging to and you refuse to let go of because it might require a different understanding of faith? There is a scene in C.S. Lewis's book, The Great Divorce, in which a man is plagued day and night by this awful lizard sitting on his shoulder. And the lizard represents the man's lust. And an angel comes to him in the night and say, I will slay the lizard for you. And yet the man refuses. And Lewis observes, there is always something in people that insist on keeping what is detrimental, even at the price of misery. There is always something that people prefer to joy, and they will fight to the death to keep it. What is that thing in your life? You see, I get the question, is God among us or not? I get that suffering causes so many people to refuse to consider God. And if you're one of these people, I want to offer you 3 simple things to consider this week. 1, remember who God is. Don't make God your therapist. And don't make God your lawyer. And don't minimize God's greatness. God's existence does not depend on us. We are made in God's image, not God in ours. The second thing is, remember what God has done. Whether you realize it or not, you have been delivered more often than you can remember or ever deserve. Amen. You have been delivered in the past. You will be delivered in the future. The third thing, remember, God has not brought you this far to leave you here. Providence is more than just a small city in a small state. Providence is God's ongoing presence in your life. And as I think of the life of Doris Kruger, I offer this one other thing. Remember that when it's over, when your earthly time on this earth is ended, it's not really over. Is God among us or not? I bet my life every day that it's true. I want you to close your eyes and listen to this prayer. Gracious God, when our courage fails and we are lost and confused, when there is no one or nothing but our struggles, our problems, our troubles. Remind us again, O God, that you are greater than these. That you are with us each step of the way. And that we are created for more than this. Amen. Please remember Doris Kruger's family. The service, graveside service,